Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Inept General coming to you with our Kislev Q&A. I hope you can all hear me. Do let me know in the chat. I'm always very nervous about doing these live events as I don't do much streaming and I'm always worried none of it works. So do give me a shout if you can hear me, all right? But as far as the format for this evening goes, guys, I thought we'd start off with some pre-selected questions that I've got from the comments of the whole Kislev series that we did. But fire away with your questions in the chat, and then once I've gone through some of the pre-selected ones, I'll come back round and we'll go through some of the questions I pick out from the chat, if that's all right with you all. So without holding off for much longer, let's get on with some of the questions we've had in the last little while, shall we? And the first one here is from Wizard Contra Geo, who said, man, I forgot to press that damn bell button, and I forgot you even existed. Well, you could have said that nicer, but it is good to be back and uploading regularly. Where do I find a lot of the lore for the Kislev stuff? Well, I find my lore from a lot of different places. Oops, sorry, just saying that my settings might be off. Bear with me a second here. All right, I think you can all hear me fine. Crocgar, let me know if you can't hear me at all well, because you said try my settings, but I'm not sure what's wrong with them. But hopefully this is working. And yeah, so these next bit, where did my lore come from? A lot of the Kislev lore got written out of continuity. Games Workshop did the event, the Storm of Chaos. A few of you might be familiar with it, but it was kind of like the end times before the end times. Anyway, it ended up a bit of a mess. But there was a bit of Kislev lore around that event where a series of books called The Ambassador was written. They're okay, but they don't really exist in canon. So they have kind of been written out. But if you want an idea and taste of Kislev, that's probably the most you'll get out of it there with those ambassador books from the point of view of an Empire ambassador living in Kislev during the time of the Chaos Invasion. It's quite interesting from that perspective. But in terms of the lore for ongoing canon in Warhammer Fantasy as it stood, I had to go to a lot of the role-playing stuff, and Kislev had a whole great book about role-playing around in Kislev, and so that I think went pretty well. And those kind of lore and stuff like that, not kind of Games Workshop direct, but Games Workshop greenlit all of that stuff. So that's where a lot of the Kislev lore ends up coming from. Also, don't the Chekists act like the Witch Hunters? Now, the Chekists are a unit I mentioned in my Kislev land video when we looked at the different cities, and they had their barracks in the capital, if I remember correctly. Now, the Chekists are something I said in that video that I didn't like the idea of very much. I don't think they fit in with the lore of the Tsarina very well. The Tsarina is meant to be this beloved queen of Kislev, but the Chekists are this secret police whose main role is to take dissenters off the streets and kind of make them disappear or send them to the equivalent of gulags. So that's a bit not quite great and not a good thing that benevolent and wise leaders tend to do. So that's why the reason I don't like Chekists. As far as their comparison to witch hunters, yes, Chekists sometimes take out chaos cults. But this is more of a byproduct. They're much more committed to either the concept of the law or anyone who has anything bad to say about the rulership of the Tsarina, rather than looking for religious fervor to cut out things like vampires and chaos cults. It's just if you're a vampire group who happens to be looking to overthrow the Tsarina, the Chekists might get involved. So I wouldn't really call them like witch hunters particularly. I'd say they're their own thing, and because of the way they operate, and most of the people they target are just other humans. So they don't focus on things like chaos cults or vampire counts or anything along those lines. So that's the reason I don't really like them. But they might appear in the game. You never know, Creative Assembly. They are a possibility. So I hope I addressed all your questions there, Gio. Moving on to the next one, let's have a look. And that is for Nemanja. You said that Kara, I'm assuming that's meant to be Tsar Boris, had one child. What about Ivan? He is the commander of the Griffin Legion. No, he's not. Not really. He doesn't really exist, I don't think. So in my army video, I kind of talked this out a little bit more. But there are several sources you can really go to for the Kislev army. One of them is the official army book that was released, and it's really more of an auxiliary force in that army book. There's not a lot to it. The other was a fan-submitted army to something called Citadel Journal, which is a subsidiary magazine of the official Games Workshop magazine. Now, this has been taken on a lot, and a lot of people have taken this as an official army. It never really was. And so there was a lot of characters written into that army that don't really exist, like the son of Boris. Now, what Creative Assembly might do is actually go back, and because he didn't even have the same last name as the Tsar was eventually given and the Tsarina eventually given, is you could maybe go back and say he has an illegitimate son. That's a possibility, something you could do. But there's no real mention of him going forward after that Citizen Journal army, as far as I'm aware. There may be somewhere, but as far as I'm aware, he's not canon and doesn't exist. So that's why I didn't really mention Ivan in the legendary lore stuff, just because I don't think he's canon, and I think the Tsarina is Boris's only son. So, moving on from that one, let's go to the next question, and this is kind of similar. And what about Baba Yaga, the Hag Mother legendary lord? Now, I got this question a few times. I'm quite surprised that a lot of you know about Baba Yaga, but Baba Yaga has a weird thing where she like rides around on her hut. I'm not going to get into Baba Yaga too much, but she again comes from that same source, that Citizen Journal one, where it's not really an official army of any sort, more of a fan creation. Now, I think they actually gave the guy a job, either at Games Workshop or in the magazine, who submitted that fan army. So he became an official employee at some stage, I believe. But Baba Yaga, again, not an official character in the lore of the role-playing game or the army book, but there are a couple of other Babas. Now, the Babas are equated to a unit I mentioned in the army list, which was the hags, the hag mothers, or the hags, basically. And they're summoning up spirits and doing all kinds of spiritual magic. There are others, as I said. One is called Baba Orzaleg. Now, her idea was that she was so powerful, when she was born, spirits gathered in unprecedented numbers around this village in Kislev. And she was born old, almost, what was that terrible film with Brad Pitt, where he ages in reverse? The name escapes me at the moment. But she was born like that, and her teeth were blackened, and her hair was all white. And the hags, who have to give up their youth to use their power, like, ooh, this is a great sign of her power as a hag. And so they took her up and they trained her, and she's become a premium fortune teller. She can almost see into the future. That's her gift. So there's her as a Baba whose possibility to be able to introduce instead of maybe Baba Yaga, or they might combine the two. There's another one called, that wasn't Baba Osaleg. That was Baba Kablega. I don't know how to say that properly. Apologies. Baba Osaleg was slightly different. Baba Osaleg, apologies for the confusion there, but Baba Osaleg was one who actually started to look after kind of mutant kids, kind of beast many kids who'd been hit with the Chaos Taint, and she ran kind of a leper colony equivalent. But then she herself was affected by the Chaos Taint and ended up growing extra limbs and arms. So you could have this horrific hag with extra limbs as a potential maybe enemy in the campaign. But that's another fun idea around the hags and another character that they could possibly have. So I hope that answers the questions. Baba Yaga, not really officially canon, but we could see some kind of Baba hag make an appearance in the Kislevite faction. For sure, might even be called Baba Yaga. But the Legendary Lord stuff is such a crapshoot that you just don't know what you're going to get. Creative Assembly could literally do anything. And I think they're probably going to put their hand in their pocket and create another character for Kislev when we eventually see them in Game 3. Okay, so moving on for Ungrim Iron Fist here. I still don't know why CA have not added the nation to Total War Warhammer 1 or 2. It's quite a major faction, has a rich history. Hopefully we'll see this in Total War Warhammer 3, or at least be a DLC race. I agree, it's... Okay, I wanted to bring this question up because I'm not sure if I would go as far as to say they have a rich history. They have some history, but Games Workshop have largely ignored Kislev for much of its existence. adding a little bit of stuff here and there. They do have some fun stuff, and they do capture the imagination as a faction. I completely agree with that. But in terms of their rich history, I'm not sure I'd agree with that statement. And that's maybe why we haven't seen them yet. And people have said that because we haven't seen them put in by Creative Assembly yet, we're never going to see them because they should have been game one. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think with the success they've had with Norska and the fact that they're just actually running out of official armies, that we will probably see Kislev make an appearance at some point. All right, moving on. We have, if they have ambassadors, why will they never agree to a trade agreement? I bloody know. This is one of my pet frustrations as well. Whether you're playing Total War Warhammer 1 or the Mortal Empires campaign, the bloody Kislevites are such stubborn gits. They would never trade with you. It'll take you ages. You could be almost their ally and they still wouldn't trade with you. But someone in the comments actually mentioned that it just goes to their kind of Slavic stubbornness. And I kind of like that idea. Of them, you know, once you're in with them, you're in. But until then, like, they might like you, but they're not going to trade with you. They don't trust you. And I think that's kind of a trait that accidentally works. I'm sure that is not by design, but that accidentally works and fits into the personality of the Kislevite people. So I like that one and thought I'd bring it to your guys' attention. Next, would Ulrika Magdova make a good legendary lord for a hybrid Kislev vampire army faction? Now, I was actually surprised how many times I got this question. I did not think you guys in general would know who this was. But I'm guessing maybe other YouTubers have mentioned her as possibilities for a Kislevite faction, or it's been in forum chat or what have you. Now, for those of you who don't have any idea who this is, Ulrika is a character from the series of novels about Gotrek and Felix. Gotrek is a dwarf slayer looking for a glorious death. Felix, kind of his scribe, companion, and occasional kind of fellow battler with him, and they go on merry adventures around the Warhammer fantasy universe. Now, eventually, Felix the human meets up with this Ulrika woman, and they end up being a couple, and probably his most significant coupling in the series, but she becomes a vampire, and it gets into a whole thing. I'm not going to delve into the full lore of this character, and if you want to have a look at her, I think I've got her, yeah. Got her here. So this is what she looks like, obviously in Kislev with the lovely architecture behind her. But I don't think she should be a character. Honestly, I've had enough of vampires in the game. We had too many vampires already. That's enough Creative Assembly. We still have to have, bear in mind, we still have to have as legendary lords for the vampires coming in with Neferata and the leaders of the different vampire bloodlines. I'd prefer to see all of them before we see this character as a vampire. And I know Creative Assembly seem to have this vampire bias, but please don't make a Kislev hybrid vampire faction. That would just be a waste of time. If you need to, there are a lot of vampires in Kislev. You know, it makes a lot of sense. Sorry, guys, excuse me. It makes a lot of sense because it doesn't get a lot of sunshine, obviously. So, you know what? Let's move there as vampires. But don't make her a hybrid Kislevite faction. You know what? Put some generic vampire factions somewhere in the lands of Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3. That's fine, but I don't want to see her. Also, because she's a character from the Gotrek and Felix stories, I don't know if we're going to see her at all, or any of them, really. We haven't seen hide nor hair of Gotrek and Felix. I actually don't think another... He's gone beyond Gotrek and Felix, but another major character in that book series is Thanquol the Skaven. I actually don't think he'll be a legendary lord for the Skaven faction at this point. I think the next legendary lord we're going to get in the DLC will be Ikit Claw. And I think they might do some kind of fun pack at the end when they chuck in Gotrek, Felix, and Thanquol and just put them in there, just to put them in the game as a kind of thank you for buying all three of these games type of thing. But I don't think we're going to see a lot of characters from those novels make too much of an appearance. Unless they've already been mentioned in the wider lore at large. Okay, so moving on from that, and also, I can't reiterate enough, please no more vampires for a little while. Eventually give us the heads of the bloodlines, but nothing until then, please. It's getting ridiculous. Too many undead around my Warhammer Mortal Empires campaign for now, thank you very much. Alright, next we have, I think we'll definitely see Lore of Ursun as a separate Lore of Magic. Now, the Lore of Ursun is the bear god of the Kislevite people, for those of you who perhaps haven't seen the video. I think I mentioned this mostly in the army video when I talk about possible heroes, and the Ursun Lore of Magic, or priestly prayers, as it were. But what other magic laws except Ice and Urson and the old hags with their spiritual magic might we see in Kislev? Well, I think there is only sort of two other options written about that I know of. And they are the laws of Daz, Dazh, who is the fire god, the light god, the sun god of the Kislevite people, kind of the god of summer. Everything warm is related to him. So you see a lot of fire spells, stroke prayers around his lore. I'm not going to get into specific details about what his lore consisted of because it doesn't directly translate into Total War Warhammer. But as well as him, there is also the lore of Tor. Now, Tor is the god of thunder and storms for the Kislevite people. So a lot of lightning. That would look like a lot of the lore of heavens that the Empire has currently, or whoever has access to the lore of heavens has. So a lot of lightning spells, maybe a wind spell, stuff like that would be a lore of heaven. So you could have priests, stroke, mages from each of these specific religions within Kislev, but I think they'll try and keep it to a minimal. I'm not 100% sure about the hags and the wise women myself. They might actually only have access to ice magic, which would be okay in my book. I did say in the army section we might see hags, but that's a longer shot. I think we'll definitely see ice magic, but not sure about other laws. So that's why I didn't necessarily include them in my army video. Alright guys, Will here says, great video, what are your thoughts for the starting 4 races of Game 3? I'm thinking Kislev may be DLC for early purchase in a similar way to Norska, the similar way Norska was for Game 2. It's at least playable prior to Game 3 release. I am not sure about that. It would fit in terms of the Norska model, and if they do exactly the same thing. In terms of the 4 starting races, I actually have a couple of things about this, and I think it has a lot to do with the map. Let me see if I can just pull one up for you guys here. Oop. Don't want that. Sorry, guys, bear with me a second. There we go. So here's the map, and what we're looking at here is it really depends where in the Warhammer world the game is set. So if we're looking at, if you can follow my mouse cursor, I hope here guys, around this area, the Darklands, and taking into consideration the Ogre Kingdoms a little bit, tying in the top half of the Dragon Isles maybe to get some High Elves in there in the game, and you're going up like this and maybe cutting in Kislev and a bit of Norska, kind of that shape, then it would be, you'd be hard-pressed to make the 4 starting races the Chaos races, as has long been rumored. Ever since Total War Warhammer 1, everyone thought that the leak or the Russian data mining that said that the 3rd game would be armies of Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch would be the ones in the game. But there are a couple of Chaos Wastes. The Eastern Steppes have some Chaos Wastes attached to them. And obviously you're dealing with Norska and the Northern Wastes in that map, if you look at it that way. But to get all 4 starting armies to fit in those Chaos Waste areas it would be a little bit hard if it's all the Chaos factions. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm actually not sure how they're going to tackle it. It'll be very interesting to see. I'm going to, for now, stick with the leak because it hasn't gone too far wrong so far. Just being a bit wrong with some of the DLC stuff. But yeah, I think it'll be a tricky thing to do by not including Chaos Dwarves, which would be here in the Darklands, and not including Ogre Kingdoms, which would be over here, a little bit further east of them. Then you're setting a large area of your map up with nothing in it if you don't have those races ready at launch, which would be a very strange thing to do, unless they switched it and gave you the main campaign up here in the Northern Wastes, maybe including a little bit of the Northern Empire, and then just in Mortal Empires, they just moved it east and just gave you a completely different area of the Warhammer world to look at it. Because I don't see them moving that map north necessarily as the Mortal Empires are concerned. They could do, and then that ties the New World and the Old World with Chaos factions, and that would make a lot of sense. But as far as the other missing races in the game, Chaos Dwarves, Ogre Kingdoms, you need to include this eastern part of land. So it's all a bit up in the air, really, until we see a map and get a better idea of what they're thinking in the game. But you know what? For my money, I'm going to stick with those original races for Total War Warhammer that we saw in the leak. Probably the Chaos races to kick things off with. Also, you know what? As a Chaos fan, I think Chaos has needed a lot of love for a lot of time. So we'll just go back to some of our questions here. Just a couple more to go before I go into the chat. If you guys have just joined us, do leave your message, do leave questions in the chat. I will be addressing them. I've just been going through some pre-selected ones for now, just while people get into the chat, type some questions up, and yeah, we get things rolling here. So here's the next question. I like the idea of getting allied units following the Lizardmen system, but isn't that a bit more Dogs of War turf? Now this comes from my mechanics video, where I speculated on the mechanics of the Kislevite faction, and I said that you could get hopefully allied units through a Lizardman-like system. Now, I think if there is a Dogs of War faction released before Total War Warhammer 3, they'll probably take whatever system they built for that and put it in the Kislev system as an allied unit system if they decide to go that way. But I'm still not sure whether we'll see it. It seems like now, because they've spent so long developing Three Kingdoms, and no matter what Creative Assembly say, for me, the Total War part of the Creative Assembly studio is a one-game studio. They say they have different teams working on different stuff, but that's never proven true at any point. The DLC team for Warhammer is maybe one team, and then there's a main game team which is working on the history one, and I think it'll be a while before we see Total War Warhammer 3, unless they don't make many changes at all. They just take the engine from 2, take the whole game, and then just slap extra assets onto it in terms of other races. If they do that, they could get it out the door pretty quick. But I'd hate to see them do that. I'd like to see some of the stuff they've tried in Three Kingdoms carry over to Total War Warhammer 3. Actually, yeah, if you guys would like a video on me looking at different systems of Three Kingdoms I'd like to see in Total War Warhammer 3, let me know in the chat. It's an idea I've been toying around with lately, but I'm not sure whether you guys would be interested in hearing my thoughts on that. But yeah, if there is a Dogs of War system, I think they'll probably use a very similar system to make up an allied unit system for Kislev if they decide to go that way. And that's about it for our pre-selected questions, guys. I'm going to delve into the chat now. So bear me just a second as I go back to the beginning of chat and see what I am dealing with here. Krotgar, if you're still here, so just going back to the beginning. Yeah, it was mainly focused on Kislev, but if you have any other general questions, fire away, by all means. Pan, you mentioned, so did Kislev ever go south? Not as far as I'm aware. When the Gospodars first moved in to the territory that would become Kislev, much of their southern territory was actually Empire territory. So Ostland and Ostermark had a lot of that territory, and the Gospodars fought with the Empire at that stage to push them out of those areas, and then take over that territory and make it Kislev. But since then, not that I'm aware of. There might be a story I don't know about at this stage, but as far as I'm aware, Kislev never really moved south. There may have been one or two skirmishes along the border, but they never launched an all-out war with the Empire. I think because mainly they have a symbiotic relationship where the Empire doesn't want to have to deal with chaos all the time, and Kislev is slightly reliant if things ever get too hectic with chaos that the Empire will come to help them. So I think it's a sort of symbiotic relationship, and it hasn't been particularly unbalanced. There might be the odd territorial skirmish, but nothing major as far as I'm aware. Aviva, something like an Ungol Legendary Lord would be dope. I agree. Someone actually mentioned in the comments of my mechanics video that you could do a fun thing like the Wood Elves, where you have Gospodar and Ungol Legendary Lords, and units from each other's sort of sides of the tribal fence would cost a bit more in terms of the secondary currency like the Wood Elves do. That could be a system they could implement as well. I like that idea. So that could be definitely something they do. I did mention in my army video, Nivena, I don't know how, Nyvena, I think is how you spelt it, who was a freedom fighter in the RPG, who got a lot of credit, and he would be a great character as an Ungol Legendary Lord, I think, and also really highlight the dynamics of the relationship between the Ungols and the Gospodars. Why did they need to make the end times? Why was that considered a good idea or direction to take things forward? Halloran Yo, I think that's how you say your name. Apologies if I get that wrong. They made the end times because of copyright law and poor sales. I think it was a combination of both. The end times allowed them to redefine stuff and all give it different names, make it a bit further away from the Tolkien foundation of the Warhammer fantasy universe, and make it its own thing that they could copyright and make up names for elves and humans and dwarves and stuff like that. And also because of flagging sales in the fantasy game. The fantasy game was always, I think this is right, it's been a while since I was buying the models regularly, but always a bit more expensive than stuff like 40k, because you had to buy so many units, basically, to make regiments and stuff like that. And I just think they had flagging sales and like, let's rejuvenate this. I would have much preferred to see, the thing I hate most about the Age of Sigmar stuff is the high fantasy aspect of the different realms. You have to pass through realm gates, and you have to go through all of them. You go to a different world, and I just don't like that. Or what they could have done much easier is just have Chaos take over the world, but Chaos doesn't look to usurp but kill everything. Chaos likes living things because that's how you get disease, that's how you experience pleasure and lust, that's how you get blood for the bloody blood god and skulls for the skull throne. If everyone's dead, there's only skulls, there's no blood. So all the Chaos gods would technically be a bit unhappy if everything died. So I would have loved to see Chaos take over. The world falls into a kind of apocalyptic anarchy. And then over time, through the effort of Sigmar or one of the Elven Pantheon, or maybe all of them above, the world was slowly purged of Chaos taint, and everyone had to start again and rebuild. And so you'd have these maybe new civilizations coming up, digging through the ruins of the Empire. Perhaps some of them based themselves off of the ruins of that place. Some of them based themselves off the ruin of Bretonnia. But also it gives you ways of doing stuff like introducing new armies and stuff like that. And also they're in one world. They're in one planet. It's a bit more relatable. So I wish they'd done something a bit more like that rather than launching in to the Age of Sigmar stuff the way they did. But that's just my opinion. As far as the game goes, a tabletop game, Age of Sigmar I think is fine as a game. It's just the lore stuff I've always had a problem with. So going further down the list. End times, I've already won the game. Do Kislev Ice Queens ever join Chaos? I'm trying to think. Somewhere in the lore I read about like a shamed Ice Queen back in the day, but I don't have a firm, I don't remember it solidly. I have a vague notion that there is history of an Ice Queen having to be usurped because she did turn to the ways of Chaos. I think so. I'm not 100% sure on that. Don't quote me. But I have a vague recollection of something along those lines happening. So that's a kind of fun aspect of maybe looking at the Kislev campaign, hoping that the Tsarina herself doesn't succumb to the taint. But again, I'm not 100% sure on that. I have a vague recollection of that happening somewhere. Don't Kislevites have enough undead for a unique vampire faction? I wouldn't say... Okay, for those of you who don't know, the Kislevite undead is weird. They have all kinds of weird undead creatures like zombies with multiple eyes and zombies with bleeding eyes. And undeadness has a funny... There's some funny stuff going on with undead in Kislev sometimes. Now, could you translate that into different units? Yes. Why would you? I don't know. Like if you're that desperate for factions, there's other places you can go, particularly in Warhammer 3. You don't have to invent out of very minimal stuff a unique Kislevite undead faction. I don't think that's necessary. And as I said earlier in the video, kind of had enough about the undead in the game. I think we have a lot of undead. I wish they'd make one or two unique units for the Musior faction. I think that's more of a pressing call than making any Kislevite hybrid undead army. And we're going to see some more undead stuff with the Bloodline leaders as well later on down the line, I'm sure, with the introduction of Nagash, which I'm sure will happen at some point. But I just don't like the idea. I mean, they might do it. I just don't like the idea myself. But they do have some weird undead things going on in Kislev. Do I see Conrad making it as a vampire lord? I hope so, but again, the issue is there's so many vampire legendary lords now, and so little from the other factions. You'd have to really balance up the game before we started to see Conrad get in there. And also, you have to think of it from Creative Assembly's perspective, not just stuff we want to see as fans of Warhammer. Conrad is a great lunatic who can't use magic, part of the von Carstein family. But for him, being introduced, like, Vlad kind of fits that niche. Like, he's just a great fighter who can't use magic particularly well. And you have a lot of vampire count lords already who are great fighters and melee fighters and have that focus. So Creative Assembly would want a lord that gives them something a little bit different, unless they're such a big part of the lore, like the Bloodline leaders, I think. So that's my thinking on Conrad making an appearance. Sorry, I was just making my way down the list here. Oop, I may have lost my place, but that's okay. Ryan here, just caught yours as I was scrolling through the chat. I kind of like the look of Three Kingdoms. I like some of the look. They're doing some interesting things with the aesthetic. I'm not sure I like the troop layout when you're trying to move a regiment with those boxes. I'm not sure if I like that, and I don't like the kind of ununique faction banners that they have. It's just like green or red. So that's one thing I don't like about the look. But there is some interesting stuff going on there, which is why I really hope they don't just make Total War Warhammer 3 with just an asset ad for Total War Warhammer 2 and try and turn that over in 6 months if Three Kingdoms doesn't do particularly well. I really hope they don't do that. I really hope they try and use some of the systems they've developed for Three Kingdoms and move that across. Now, what I'd like to ask you guys actually in the chat is, in Three Kingdoms, what we've seen a lot of is some real wonky AI when it comes to sieges. Now, would it be worth having full cities in Warhammer 3 with that wonky AI in sieges? Or would it be easier to be like, okay, to spare us this wonky AI, let's just keep it simple, the Warhammer style? It'd be interesting to see, I think particularly if Three Kingdoms launches and those sieges still have a lot of questions to ask about them. That would be an interesting question I think the community needs to look at. All right, so I've refound my place, guys. Does the lore say anything on the lore of Tsar Alexis Romanov? There is some stuff, obviously, because he was the Tsar in the time of the Great Chaos War, I think, if that's who you're referring to. And there's some lore, but the Tsars and Tsarinas are kind of written kind of offhandish. They're just who's in charge at the time. There aren't sort of great epic stories about them. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of books in the Black Library about Kislev. I think there are about 3 or 4 of them, but not huge sort of sweeping great tales of different Tsars and Tsarinas from different times. Short of maybe Mishka, the first Tsarina, to come across to lead the Gospodars over the hills and attack all of the different factions. I think she's probably, except for the Tsarina Katrin herself, now is the most written about other Tsar or Tsarina in Kislev. Inquisitor Thomas, am I going to leave you again? I have no intention of pottering off as long as I have done previously. But, you know, life sometimes gets in the way. You sometimes get distracted with other stuff. And you know what? Sometimes it takes them a year to bring out new DLC for Total War Warhammer 2, and you maybe lose interest in it a little bit. That's what's really happened to me previously. It's like, oh, this is such a long wait. I'm going to just move on. And I just stopped playing the game, really. And if I stop playing it, it's off my mind and I stop thinking about it as much. But as I said in previous videos, I have been looking to launch into another gaming universe fairly soon. Plans are in the work for that, so hopefully that'll give me something else to focus on and maybe different stories for you guys to enjoy. Louise, I think Louise Alberto is asking about the previous question on whether we were looking at the sort of relationship between the Empire and Kislev. I think where he says, so they're sort of semi-reliable allies. They had a treaty since the time of Sigmar's. Yeah, so they're pretty reliable. I mean, the fact, I think if I was an Ungol and I lived in Kislev, I'd be pretty pissed at the Empire because they're the ones who made the allegiance with Sigmar in those ancient times. The Ungols did. And then the one time they really needed the Empire to help them out, the Ungols were like, help, there's this new invading force with this lunatic ice magic. Help us, Empire. They were like 3 emperors at the time. They're going through a civil war and just no one came to help them. So they were just like, oh, okay. Even the Empire properties that the Gospodars took over didn't get a huge reaction from the rest of the Empire, short of the sort of impoverished northern provinces of the Empire who didn't have much to fight them back with. Bearing in mind also that, as I've mentioned in my history video, the Gospodars were the first humans to reliably be able to use magic. Everyone else was, if you used magic, you turned to chaos eventually. I mean, you could maybe use it for a bit before you turned, but eventually you inevitably turned to chaos. And so there's arrives this force who didn't turn to chaos with the magic they were using. So it must have been pretty overwhelming, actually. Gerard just asked, I think Skaven will have a lot of things in this DLC. I think they will. I think we'll hopefully see the Jezzails. I think we're going to get a lot of Clan Scryer stuff. As I said, I think we'll get Ikit Claw, who's kind of the tabletop representative of... Sorry, Skaven aren't my number one army, so I sometimes get their clans mixed up. But I think it's Clan Scryer. And Clan Scryer will probably be based in the Mortal Empires campaign out of Skaven Blight itself. And in the Vortex campaign, I'm not sure where they'll put them, actually. They could kind of put them anywhere. But I think that's where they'll end up being as Clan Scryers. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's a weird one because the actual conflict, as I predicted long ago, I think I put out a video ages ago about predicted DLC, and we've been kind of right so far in terms of sort of rough guesses of what they were going to put out. But the main argument is that lizard men hate Clan Pestilence. They're the ones. And that's why I was actually quite surprised to see Clan Pestilence in the starting game for Warhammer 2, because it didn't really leave them a lot of leeway for that DLC. But I think we'll end up with a lizard man Clan Scryer thing, and they might make up some conflict about something or other in that campaign. Maybe even something as generic as sort of a race to Albion or something like that. I'm not sure what direction they're gonna go with it. But yeah, it'll be fun, and I'm looking forward to having Regiments of Renown for those armies, and hopefully maybe getting Gorok in the Lizardmen campaign, or we might... that's my guess for who we're going to get as far as their Legendary Lord goes. But I'm actually... whoever it is for the Lizardmen, I'll be happy, because I think that faction needs a lot of love at the moment. It's been kind of ignored, and I hate Krotgar's starting position currently in both Mortal Empires and the Vortex campaign. What do I think the DLC after the next one is going to be? So after Skaven and Lizardmen, what do I think that DLC is going to be? Do I think Araby has a chance? And do I think that Nagash has a chance to be added in the game, possibly in Game 3? Okay, so let's take those questions one at a time. What do I think the next DLC is going to be? Does Araby have a chance? Araby definitely has a chance. Now, the fun thing here is that it's probably the most complete... No, that's a lie. I think Dogs of War should be next. By rights, Dogs of War should be next. It has an army book. They should definitely do Dogs of War, and I want to see Dogs of War. But Araby takes up a lot of space on the map currently, and so I was surprised when they did Vampire Coast first. So Araby does have a chance, but I think it really is a coin toss between Dogs of War and Araby. Dogs of War might be too complicated a thing for them to do, so I think Araby's a simpler army book to put together, simpler mechanics and stuff like that. So that's my pessimist. If I put on my pessimist hat, I'd say they're going to do Araby, but I'd also love to see Dogs of War. Both have a lot of unique and colorful units. I have video on both. If anyone's new to my channel, do just type in Araby or Dogs of War into my channel, and you'll get my videos and thoughts on both of those factions. But I'd love to see either, really. I'd be happy with either one of those, and I think they'd both be a great contribution to the game at large. Kislev equals Frozen 2. Yeah, why not? Someone, yeah, Tsarina Elsa. Is that the character's name for Frozen? I think so. Tsarina Elsa. What will the starting provinces be, and will there be Kislev sub-factions like the Empire? Okay, starting factions will probably be divided into the oblasts. So you'll probably have, that will be the territories they have. Now, what you'd see is the Tsarina in the in the eastern oblast. I always get them where Kislev is. I think it's the southern. So Kislev in the southern, that will be the ruling faction. That will be the Tsarina, maybe Boris as well, but they'll probably split out Boris, actually. They might put Boris in Troll Country, where he's been fighting the fight. So Tsar Boris in Troll Country, fighting the fight against, Beastman or something like that, getting his name Tsar Boris the Red, or something along those lines, which is how he earned it. The problem is, with the other ones, I could see them doing, because I was talking about vampires before in Kislev, and there are a lot of vampires, and I think the smaller settlement in Kislev, they might put a vampire faction there, kind of like a Mousillon in Bretonnia, because there are particularly vampires around the city of Prague, but giving them that capital is a bit over the top. Unless you do something like there was a coup in Prague, and so the vampires took it over, and one of your first missions is to go and liberate the city from vampires, because all sorts of terrible stuff happens to that city, and you could put vampires there. Not a hybrid new vampire faction, but just general, like, vampire count vampires up there. And then in Troll Country, you could move Frog, actually, to Troll Country. That would be kind of fun to see. But if they're going to put a Kislevite faction there, it could be anything. As I say, unless you know the Legendary Lords, it's hard to divide them up into factions. But that's my best guess at the moment. Hey, Net General, if Total War Warhammer 3 is just 4 Chaos factions and not Chaos Ogres and Kislev, do you think the game would be worth buying? I certainly don't think so. This is why I think it'll be a bit weird for them to do a full, because Demons of Chaos is one army book, and that gives you all the different demons from the different Chaos gods. But I don't see them making Demons of Chaos a full as like a single faction in the game. It's almost a bit too much for a single faction. Particularly because I don't think they'll do a strict Demons of Chaos army. You'll mix them in with Chaos Warriors of different types and stuff like that. So I think in terms of that question, if you start with the 4 Chaos factions, will it be worth buying? I would buy it because I love Chaos. If you don't like Chaos, it's probably a hard one to sell off to you. But I guess if they've almost got you invested at this point, you kind of just have to go for it, because it will also only be your way to access Ogre Kingdoms, Chaos Dwarves, and Kislev, I think. I think you'll fight against maybe a Kislev army. I think, maybe see them as a pre-order like Chaos Wars for Total War Warhammer 1, as was said earlier. Something along those lines. But I think it's a funny one. I think it will be a bit weird, and I'm actually just very curious. Once I see a map, I'll know exactly what they're doing. I'll get where they're coming from. But until we see a map from Creative Assembly, it's a bit tricky to say. But for me, it would be worth getting, because some of those demons are horrendous monstrosities. And if you could, even for a starting, say you get Total War Warhammer 3, and it's just the Demons of Chaos or 4 Chaos God factions, you still get to take them around the mortal empires, killing off all the rest of the humans with different kinds of horrific demons, offering blood to the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. So there's a whole bunch of fun you could have with it. If it's not your cup of tea, then I get it. I kind of get it. If Chaos isn't your cup of tea, you might wait until it goes on sale and the first DLC comes out or something along those lines. Thank you very much for the donation, DKK. Very much appreciated. I'm glad to be able to entertain you with the lore videos, and I'm glad you enjoy them. I'd definitely like to see you play Mark of Chaos. Have you ever played it? I know not well-received game, but Warhammer Fantasy fans have to take what they can get. Eric, I played Mark of Chaos when I was a younger man, and I hated it. I was coming off the Shadow of the Horned Rat and Dark Omen, which I love those games. I thought they were fantastic, and I thought Mark of Chaos was going to be one of those, but it was not. It looked a lot better than those games, obviously. It looked much closer to what we see as a sort of Total War game these days. But there was something like lackluster about it. I might play it on the channel one day. Maybe my thoughts might change on it. But I just remember just plowing through it and not enjoying any sort of bit of it. Oh, maybe I think I liked it early doors, and then I think it got a bit trickier and difficult. And there was a little bit. It was just sort of set up battles, if I remember correctly. Now, bear in mind, I've not played the game since probably it came out, since the year of its release. So I might be misremembering this, but I don't think there was a lot of flexibility in kind of the troops you could select for any given battle or anything like that. I might be completely wrong about that, but there was something about it. I just have this very negative memory of the game. But you know what? Maybe worth going back to revisit. Bjorn, thank you for the chat there. And yeah, I agree with you. Please no more undead. Enough is enough already. B. Vargas, give us some halflings. Yes, please do give us some halflings. They would be great. I've wanted them in the game forever, but looking at the way the game's being structured, what I see happening is after Total War Warhammer 3, Creative Assembly look back and then start a long development, a long sort of self-analysis into we're probably looking at medieval at this point, the next medieval game, if I was to guess at what their next project would be. And that would be a long wait. And in that long wait, I see them churning out a lot of extra content for the Warhammer series. And then maybe in that window, sort of not in the initial year of release of Total War Warhammer 3, but when they're just kind of finished with the project and they're just trying to sort of milk us for as much money as we have, that's when we get stuff like Halfling DLC and stuff like that. So you know what, it's a bit sad, but it'll be great to see them, no matter what delivery mechanism or capitalistic machinations are behind the move. So yeah, I'd love to see the Halflings make an appearance. I see I'm only a bit of the chat where I was talking about Three Kingdoms. I hope CA also add Ogre Mercenaries for the Empire. You know what? I'd like to see it because it is a fun unit, but we haven't seen a lot of backtracking units into armies. Like, I wanted to see the Mournghouls make an appearance in the Vampire Count armies, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that. So I don't think we're ever going to see a backtracked Ogres into the Empire, as much as fun as it would be. It wouldn't be even that hard to do. Just like build a building in the Empire and attach Ogre Mercenaries to it and done. But you know what? I'm a little bit skeptical, but would love to see it if they do it. Hopefully maybe a modder gets around to it once we have official models for the Ogre Kingdoms. It seems a lot of you have some doubts about Three Kingdoms as well. AI is already wonky on Warhammer Siege, is true, but that's Bjorn. Who said that? Sorry, I lost the name of whoever said that. AI wonky in Warhammer Siege. It can be, but it's better being wonky in a small, simple setting than it is being wonky on a massive city map, if you see what I mean. So that's my only thinking on that one. Do I like Elijah? Do I like the idea of Creative Assembly creating Warhammer original characters like Silostra? I don't hate the idea if it gives us more characters, but I don't like the idea if there are characters available who fill that niche already. I think the only like Silostra is almost exactly like Van Geist would have been, who was a ghostly captain, runs the ship. The idea that they have him in the game is that when you do the spell, the ghost ship coming up, that's meant to be his ship. But the only reason I can see for not putting him in the game is that he was a bloke, and that seemed like the only reason they made it a woman. Is that all the rest of they already had Aranessa, so I'm not even sure why they didn't need to make up the character. I think it's fine. It's a fun little character. This operatic singer trying to sink the island of Ulfwan. It was a bit flimsy as motivation there, but I don't mind. I don't hate it, but it's not my favorite. That's the way I'll put it. Don't hate it, but not my favorite. I prefer them to use actual characters around the Warhammer world, but you know, I'm not up in arms about it. I'm not enraged by the whole thing. Am I going to do a video on Ogre Kingdoms and the Chaos Dwarves? Yes, eventually, but I can't promise when. I will try and cover all the major factions for Warhammer 3 and just in the Warhammer universe in general. So yeah, eventually I will get round to them, I am sure. I'm sorry guys, this scrolling is not going well for me. Archeon the Ever-Chosen, as I just said, yeah, I will be doing videos on the other factions. I'm not sure if I'm going to comment on all of their mechanics. I just think because Kislev was a weird one, you weren't really sure how they were going to play it. And I think you're almost guaranteed Kislev's going to be a DLC. I probably won't do it for the other factions, particularly the Chaos ones, because what's going to happen is the 4 starting races will all have the same mechanics, like they had in Total War Warhammer 1, like they had in Total War Warhammer 2. It's almost worse to be a starting faction. If you're a Warhammer fan and one of your armies is a starting faction, you're kind of boned because you're not getting as much interesting or specifically made mechanics for the way your faction plays. It's just all fitting into this bin that the other factions can play in. So I think they've done a lot more interesting stuff with the DLC factions than they have done with the main core factions when they release one of these games. So it's almost like you don't want your favorite faction to be a main faction. You want it to be a DLC faction. So probably not, that's why I probably won't go into the mechanics for all of them, but I'm 90% sure that Kislev will be a DLC rather than a core faction in one of these Warhammer games. Pan, I heard there are pygmies in Warhammer. Do you know about them? Do they even exist? Yes, the pygmies have been written about. I think maybe in White Dwarf. I can't actually remember the source. But there are pygmies in Warhammer. Will we ever see them in the game? Absolutely not, I'm afraid. I don't think we'll ever see the pygmies in the game. We'll get halflings before pygmies, and I don't think we'll see halflings for a very long time. Just going through some more questions. Didn't the Tomb Kings have magic first, since they are the oldest human civilization? I suppose you're actually right there to I'd actually have to check on the nature of Tomb King magic and whether it was the teachings of. Yeah, no, you're probably right. Yeah, no, you're right. Nagash and the necromancy and the stuff like that you're right, was the first magic. And then, but as far as the Empire, like that was a long dead civilization by the time the Empire came around. So I suppose at the time, the only living magic, should I say, maybe not the oldest human magic, the only currently existing human magic is what the Gospodars had at the time. A very good point, well put, actually. Louis says, I think Dogs of War could have their main foe be Araby. I agree, but they're never going to give you two races in one go, if you see what I mean. So if we have the next DLC race pack, they're not going to release Dogs of War and Araby at the same time. But yeah, I see that the conflict you set up there could be existent, but I still think you already have Bretonia, some Bretonian settlements in Araby, and that's really the main fight in the Warhammer fiction, is the sort of faux crusade of Bretonia versus Araby, funnily enough, set up by the Skaven. So that's a fun little thing that you'd have there, and that's the way that would probably play. It'd be probably more Bretonia than the Dogs of War focus if we get to see Araby in the game. Panout also has another point. They will never do Araby these days. Yeah, not Creative Assembly, Games Workshop weren't the most politically sensitive team out there when they were creating a lot of these factions, and there is a lot of very stereotypical stuff. But I don't want to say it's not offensive in the way. I suppose it's offensive in the way the sort of Iron Sheik is offensive in WWF, or WWE as it's now known. And it is, and it's very stereotypical, but it's not necessarily insulting. It's not calling them bad people. And it is also, I think, the idea of it being set in a fictional universe is the same as well, as opposed to, I don't think every sort of German back in the day wore a weird feathered hat. Kind of thing, or the Holy Roman Empire. Maybe they did, I don't know. But it's just based on what people wear at specific histories of time and taken a bit out of context. Stuff like the magic carpet and the genies is maybe a bit over the top, but it's not the most offensive army I've seen out there, but I can see what you mean by it could be politically sensitive to do Araby. What is Games Workshop saying about CA making stuff in their game like Silostra and the Vampire Coast? Well, the Vampire Coast was kind of a fan favorite thing that Games Workshop knew about already. So they didn't really invent anything from there. So the way they got the faction for the Vampire Coast is actually, I think all the units have been written about within official Games Workshop publications. Whether it was the army of the Vampire Coast in that issue of White Dwarf, or whether it was the Dreadfleet game. So either way, all the units were kind of covered, and all the heroes except for Silostra and her paladin and stuff were covered as well. The fact they haven't moved those Ghost Knights over to the Mousillon faction is a sin. But yeah, they were all those units, I think, for the most part, were written about somewhere. Maybe interpretations taken by Creative Assembly over stuff like the crabs, but written about somewhere at least. So they didn't completely make that up, but I think they have to get the all clear. I remember when they were releasing Vlad into the game, and they made a big deal about, yeah, because Vlad is technically dead in the lore until the end times actually happens. So they said they asked permission from Games Workshop to do that. So I have to assume they have the green light to do stuff like Silostra Diaphin. They're not just going to do it without asking. Okay, just scrolling down, scrolling down. Yeah, da, da, da. What do I think about Kislev, Demons of Chaos, Dogs of War, Ogre Kingdoms as the starting factions? Um, Dogs of War, you'd be hard pressed to reason why they were there. Like most mercenary work, Kislev does hire mercenaries, absolutely. But most mercenary work, most of the Dogs of War stuff is all Tilia, Estalia focused. So it would be a bit tricky to say why the Dogs of War were there, but then technically a Dogs of War army could appear anywhere in the fantasy world. I think that's too. I just can't see them doing Demons of Chaos as a single faction. I don't think that's the way that army will work. I think they will break them out under the four Chaos Gods, and so that's that's a lot of armies already. So I don't think we'll see them all. I think Ogre Kingdoms will probably be the first DLC. If not, if Kislev doesn't come as a pre-order, I think Ogre Kingdoms will be the first DLC, and then we'll take it. It could be anything from there. I think they'll make us wait for Chaos Dwarves possibly. Although I do love the Chaos Dwarves. Maybe they think they can look a bit goofy, but you know what? They're fun little buggers. Has been any news on Kislev actually happening? No, not particularly, but it's a no-brainer. I've seen people say that they said they'd never do Kislev. I think that was in relation to Game 1, and when people were asking around the end of Game 1, whether Kislev was coming, after, like, the Bretonnian, basically when they were very much flagging, like, oh, hey, this is the end of stuff for Game 1, it was very obvious, and then I think someone asked, they said, we're not doing Kislev, I think in relationship to Game 1. But I think it's you'd have to see it, particularly if you're focusing in the north and the eastern part of the Warhammer world, at least the sort of popular version of the Warhammer world. The only factions I think we will never see is Cathay, Nippon, Ind. I don't think we see any of that stuff, at least for a very long time after the release of Total Warhammer 3. I think that would be a very thing to do. Technically, at this stage, apart from maybe Ind, they've made all the armies. I mean, Tilia is basically an Empire army with some Dogs of War units that look like the Roman Empire. Estalia, like some of the Spanish back in the day. Maybe that's the one area they haven't covered. But now they've done Three Kingdoms. They've got Cathay. They've done Shogun. They've got Nippon. You just throw in some supernatural giant stuff, and you've got your armies. So they probably have all these great animations for all these armies tucked away somewhere in the data vaults of Creative Assembly. Okay, just a few more. We're almost there. We're almost caught up, guys. I don't think we're going for much longer. It's been over an hour now. So if you have any questions now, just chuck them in. But I think what we're doing is looking for a... Yeah, Louise is agreeing with me here. Demons is a hard one since there are 4 Chaos Gods. It's a tricky one, honestly. Jest Amani asked a bit of a weird one. Do I think Kislev will be in Game 1 or 3? I think they're going to be in Game 3. Will they be backtracked into Game 1? Absolutely not. I don't think they're going to backtrack anything into Game 1 or Game 2 for that matter. I think you'd have to buy the third game to play as Kislev. I don't think they're going to include... They're not going to put them sort of back in those older they were not going to make an appearance in 2, that's for sure. It's just nowhere near Kislev. Every faction they put in 2 has to be somewhere and have a reason for being on the Vortex map. Same way that every faction in 3 would have to have a reason for being in the map that they eventually pick out for that area. So, sorry, excuse me. So, yeah, I don't think that we'll see them backtracked. If that's what you meant by the question, hopefully that helps. Cube, Atnap General, first time catching a stream. Glad to have you on board. Working on my own pseudo Russian, Polish, Hungarian faction for my own fantasy setting. It's a fun sort of cultural area to draw on. I think if Creative Assembly had put in, it's funny. Like, I'm not hugely familiar with the Imperial Guard in 40k, but I remember being a kid. They used to have a kind of same themed, Kislev-esque themed Imperial Guard units. I always thought looked really cool as well, and I wish they just put a bit more effort into Kislev back in the time of fantasy. But I guess with the units they did make and they did cast, they never sold that well. And it's maybe because they're like, short of Boris, which I think was always a fun model with him riding the bear, they're not that imaginative. There's not a lot going on there. There's sort of the units of Lancers, and then there's the units of Archers, and it's really about it. And the Cossars. There's not a lot to do. They spark the imagination a bit more with some of the moldings they'd made for Kislev. It might have been a different story. Tristan, hello, General. Does Bretonia have any dealings with Kislev in the lore? I have to imagine so. I think they probably trade quite a bit because they get some of the trade over, and you'd have to stop off. Not a lot of places would go sort of direct from the coast of Bretonia and Kislev. I think they're just two major trading hubs. And so they'd have some kind of interaction, but not a lot. I think there's some Bretonian wine and stuff obviously drunk by the richer people in Kislev, and they do... There's not a lot of stories about Bretonia riding to the aid of Kislev, as far as I'm aware. So not huge ties, nothing like the Empire, because they're just so far away, I think, in terms of travel and logistics and everything like that. So not a huge amount, but they've never been against them in any way, I think. Goodman, as I said, not much longer, maybe another 5-10 minutes. Goodman, my week's not been bad. Thank you for asking. Jonathan, thank you for being a long-time listener. Who do I think will be the next Lord Pack? Yes. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'll go through it. I think it will be Ikit Claw, Clan Scryer units, so a lot of like tech-focused units of the Skaven that we're missing, and there are quite a lot of them missing. If you check out my missing units video for Total War Warhammer 2, I cover it in that video. But I think it will be Ikit Claw for the Skaven. That will take their tally to 4, and that'll be it for the Skaven. I think it'll be hugely controversial, but I'm not sure we're going to get Thanquol. Thanquol, the biggest Skaven character, maybe not going to see him in this game. A bit weird. It would have made more sense to have Thanquol starting and keep Skrulk back, and then have Skrulk make an appearance in this DLC. That would have actually made a lot more sense. And I think for the Lizardmen, we're going to get the Prophet of Sotek, and we're going to get and I hope we get Gorok. Those are the two I hope we get for the Lizardmen. That's my gamble. That's what I'm gonna stand out on a limb and say. So I think, yeah, as I said, yeah, that's it. That's what I think we'll get. Turls, I mentioned earlier, maybe I'm just getting to your question now, possibility of Nippon and Cafe. No, not for a very long time, unless they want some cash much later on, and after Total War Warhammer 3. They're never going to go that far east. There's so little on those factions. They would be fun, as I said. They have probably most of the animations in the bag now, but we're not going to see them for a long time. So what units do I want to see in the future Lizardmen DLC Troglodon? Yes, the Troglodon would be great. Oh Christ, I'm having a mind blank for the Lizardmen units. I'd like to see the Ripidactyls. I think that's a unit that's badly needed for the Lizardmen. A unit that can actually fight stuff in the sky and do some good damage. The Ripidactyls. So I'd love to see the Ripidactyls. The name that's escaping me is the flaming lizards that breathe fire. That would be a great unit. Like they would act like the Iron Drakes for the dwarves. I think the Lizardmen would benefit fantastically for them, particularly as they need to deal with all these bloody vampires in the Vampire Coast now. So I think they would be great. Those are the only two that jump. We'll probably get the Ark of Sotek, basically a different bit of gear for a Bastillodon. They'll probably do damage to units around it because the idea is it's an infinite pool of snakes, magically conjured snakes that make a carpet of venomous snakes around it. So that would be a cool unit to see, and it would also go with the Prophet of Sotek theme that I think we're going to get in the DLC. Salamanders, that's it. Thank you, chat. Salamanders, I think we definitely need to get, because they're such an iconic unit. I'd also like to see the Razordon, which is a massive dinosaur that shoots quills off its back that go like pierce metal, because I think the Lizardmen would very much benefit from an armor piercing focused projectile unit, And I think the Razordons would be great to see as well. So those are units I'd probably most like to see for the Lizard Men. Yeah, I really do. I think the Lizard Men are a great army. I think they're missing a few of their key ingredients at the moment, and it would be great to have them complete. And can't wait to maybe get back into the campaign for them, and maybe actually like have a Lizard Man in the hinterland of the Southlands, like actually not of the Southlands, of the New World area in Lustria. Because at the moment, like Mazdamundi's up there in the north, that's great, but that's not really in the thick of it. That's not in the jungle. That's where the Lizard Men should be, killing Skaven in the depths of the jungle, and maybe dealing with those silly dwarves who live in those mountains as well. K-Franz, no, this hasn't been asked before. Which faction am I most excited for? Ooh, I think for Total War Warhammer 3, I think I'm most... There are some Chaos Legendary Lords I can't wait to see, but that's not really a full faction. I think I would love... I think, you know, honestly, Chaos Dwarves. I'd love to see the Chaos Dwarves. I think they're such a great, weird faction with their Bull God and the dwarves who do fire magic and some of their crazy artillery. And they are a Forge World faction, but they're just so weird and entertaining. They're probably what I'm most excited to see in Total War Warhammer 3. Ogres are great. Kislev is great. But, you know, just for me, my personal taste, I think Chaos Dwarves. I think rather than answering the movie about what I think about the film Shrek, I think we're going to call it there, guys. Thank you all for joining me on this one. It's been a genuine pleasure. Apologies for the long pauses while I was going back through the chat. Just trying to find some fun questions for us all to do. Kind of, you know, tricky to do single-handed when you're just going through it on your own. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you enjoyed the Kislev series. It was a lot of fun to do. And yeah, look out for more videos coming up soon, I'm sure. Did anyone ever say if you guys would like to see my ideas on what features should make it into Three Kingdoms or not? I'm not sure if I missed that chat, but I might do a brief video on that coming up. But other than that, yeah, thanks all for joining, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, guys, bye.